Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and House Majority Whip Tom Emmers goes toe-to-toe with the Situation Room host Pamela Brown and lays the smackdown on every single issue. Let's dive in.
I know that you're a big supporter of President Trump, of course, but he has tested the boundaries of presidential power and now seeming to want to do away with checks and balances. He says he will follow the judge's orders, but he clearly has taken steps, not just attacking judges, but he has gotten rid of inspectors general without notifying Congress under the law, freezing funds appropriated by Congress, trying to get rid of birthright citizenship in the Constitution, firing these federal trade commissioners when there's a Supreme Court precedent saying a president can't do it. What do you think about all of that taken as a whole?
Well, again, I think this is a narrative that the media is trying to create.
No, just
in
to
fact,
be respectful with Emmer, it's not a narrative. I just
I'm going to be respectful
specific
too.
Examples.
But when you don't talk about the Dobbs decision that Joe Biden viciously attacked our Supreme Court because he disagreed with it, and you make this look like something it's not, Donald Trump's not happy, I'm sure. But when it comes to what he's trying to do, there are 77 million Americans who elected him to do exactly what he's doing. And you know what? There's a lot of Americans who are very frustrated with judges who appear to be legislating from the bench instead of applying the law to the facts that are presented.
Right. First of all, Biden did not call for the judge to be impeached. But as you well know, there is a separation of powers. There's Article 3.
So he didn't use the word impeachment.
Okay, but and listen, that's in the past. This isn't about whataboutism. And I didn't just focus on the judge. I also focused on everything as a whole. But also, look, this is the way that our democracy works, whether you like it or not. And there is a judicial process under Article 3 that goes up to the Supreme Court. That is what is happening here. This law was challenged. It went to a judge. The judge made the ruling. There's appeals, and it goes up through the process. Do you have a problem with the way that our system of government under the Constitution is made up?
Not at all. If that's what you're asking me, Pamela, I would actually interpret some of the things you just said differently, but you and I have a different perspective on this. I think that the administration is doing exactly what they were elected to do. I think the judicial branch is going to do what it has been doing, and guess what? You'll resolve it in court in the long run. That's why Justice Breyer, it was a very balanced statement when he talks about that's what you do. You'll appeal it, you'll take it from there.
I want to go to something else happening on Capitol Hill. After passing the government funding bill, Republicans are pivoting to reconciliation in order to make President Trump's tax cuts permanent. As you know, that the Congressional Budget Office says cuts to Medicaid would need to be included to meet the goals outlined in the GOP budget. Millions of Americans rely on Medicaid. President Trump, we should emphasize, says Medicare will not be touched. But he has endorsed, as you're also seeming to endorse, the so-called waste, fraud, and abuse. What do you say to critics who claim that's just cover to make substantial cuts to Medicare? And you're saying that because you know how bad it would be politically to say we're going to make cuts to Medicare.
Donald Trump's already said that we're not, and that there's no way.
But you're going to make cuts based on waste, fraud, and abuse, right?
Pamela, you're doing it again. You're trying to put words out there that don't exist. What this is literally fine. And by the way, waste, fraud, and abuse. You're not in favor of getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, and you rely on the CBO. You rely on the CBO that has absolutely been unreliable in the last 7-8 years or more. So while they're necessary, we got to work with them. You can't. You can say it's nonpartisan, but what did they say about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act when it was enacted into law in 2017? They said it wasn't going to generate any revenue like it has. It's been exponential compared to what they predicted. Sure, they're like weather people. They don't have to be right, and they put these out.
And you can criticize them. But what I'm getting at, are Republicans going to make cuts through waste, fraud, and abuse to Medicaid, as you said? I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just asking the question.
I think cleaning up programs, getting rid of the waste, the fraud, the abuse, so that these programs can actually be funded for the people who they were created for. I think that is a Republican, Democrat, and American goal. And I think the president's doing it right, and we're going to.
That is absolutely textbook Tom right there, okay? Tom Emmer's, who might just be a House Majority Whip, all right? No one really thinks much of the whip. Their job is to make sure the sludge of legislation moves through the pipeline, but they are some of the most important people in all of Washington, which also means that this dude is probably going to be pretty good in front of a camera, and you can tell that Pamela Brown didn't really know who she was going up against. And that just goes to show that, once again, CNN doesn't understand just how the media landscape has changed, and now they have to learn the hard way that so many people in the Republican Party has started to learn how to deal with the mainstream media. And in this segment, there are 4 major issues going on here. There's one big one that I really want to tackle at the end. Let's start with the obvious, okay? Let's start off with the checks and balances system that we have in our governmental system. That wonderful idea that the judiciary can make sure that the executive branch isn't going overboard, that the congressional branch gives some powers to the judiciary and then tells the president what to do, and then the president, the executive branch, goes out and then makes sure that those laws are enforced. And so that means that each part of our federal government has the ability to look at the other part and go, I don't think you're doing the right thing. Now, on one hand, this does mean that our system does get full of, well, sludge and sometimes legal nonsense. And sometimes the president can indeed go overboard. But that's part of the point of this system. If the president is indeed going overboard, the courts are going to find it out. And if the courts are going overboard, well, guess what? The Congress can figure that out. And then action can be taken from there. And the most important part is each branch pays attention to and obeys what the other branch is doing. Okay? It is that simple. And so for CNN to be clutching their pearls and going, Donald Trump is embroiled in all these lawsuits again. Oh, how terrible for our situation. How terrible for our Constitution. No, that's exactly how it's supposed to work. This is a good thing, Democrats. This is a good thing, okay? If it turns out Trump is doing the right thing, nothing's going to happen. If he's doing the wrong thing, he's going to stop, okay? It's that simple. Stop the fear-mongering. And that's sort of the running theme of this whole video, that CNN here and Pamela Brown is trying to set up for a major moment of fear-mongering that they can use to push more headlines and tell a bunch of rich white liberals that the sky is falling, and eventually Chicken Little is going to be proven to be wrong, and no one's going to pay attention to that little boy who cried wolf. So that leads us to another major issue, the issue of potential impeachment proceedings that might be going on against the judges. We've sort of talked about this one. I've sort of brought this up. But the idea that judges may or may not be within their actual boundaries, well, that's once again the checks and balances system working out for itself. But the other issue we need to tackle real quickly is the idea that Social Security and Medicare is going to be cut and slashed to the bone. Or at least that's what Pamela Brown is hoping that Tom Emmer is going to say here. And there's actually some historical precedent for this. Back in both the late 90s and the early 2000s, the Republican Party took a look at the basic demographic problem that the United States is having and said, oh, Social Security and Medicare, it's going to start becoming a huge problem on down the line. We might need to talk some reforms. They did so, I believe, in 98, and it did not work too well for them that year in Congress. They did it again in late 2005, and that's when the Democrats came roaring back in the late 2000s. And so you come to that problem, and you think that, oh, Republicans actually don't want to talk about this. When the reality is, they've already promised that they're not going to change, they're not going to use legislative power to make drastic changes to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. And furthermore, that Elon Musk is only looking at the waste, the fraud, and the abuse. And that's like having an MRI scan. We found a bunch of tumors. It's time to cut them out. I would rather go through that MRI scan, have those tumors cut out, than have to deal with literal chemotherapy, okay? Chemotherapy is not a good thing, and currently the Democrats and the mainstream media don't want to talk about any of the potential issues, and they would rather us talk about something like, I don't know, MAID instead, and hope that the issue just magically goes away. Well, guess what? It's not going to. It's an issue that has to be dealt with in some form or fashion, and at least taking away some of the problem is going to help us be a healthier patient down the road. But finally, I need to bring up the Trump tax cuts. And it's something that I don't think Democrats in the mainstream media fully understand. Because when it happened under Reagan, when it happened under Bush II, and when it happened again under Donald Trump, guess what? When your taxes got cut, the economy improved and there was more revenue coming in. It's almost as if when you have more money in your pocket, you either save more and invest it, or you spend it immediately. Either way, those two things help out the economy, and they will even help out, yes, you and me, the John Q taxpayer. Okay? And let's bring this up that even The Hill had to report on this. Income data published by the IRS clearly showed that on average, all income brackets benefited substantially from Republicans' tax reform law, with the biggest beneficiaries being working and middle income filers, not the top 1%, as so many Democrats have argued. In other words, it's the average Joe in America that benefited from these plans. Barack Obama understood this. That's why he didn't push for Congress to end the tax cuts. That's why the Democrat Congress under Joe Biden did absolutely nothing. And remember, Reagan was working with Democrats as well, and they didn't stop the tax cuts under his administration either. They know how this economy works. They know the fact that these tax cuts do indeed help out people. And so the mainstream media, people like Pamela Brown, think that Tom Emmers is going to be just this pushover because he's not some A-lister. When the reality is, he knows more about policy, he knows more about the legislative process, and he knows more history than I think Pamela Brown will ever understand in her lifetime. That is what happens when you go up against a House Majority Whip. It's not going to end well. And CNN, they're going to have to learn to start being a bit nicer to Republicans, because if they keep this up, they're not going to be around much longer. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.